It's a newsroom now. But years ago in this studio, there was a dream called Johnny McQueen that became a reality on Cleveland television. It all began right here in 1957. If only the walls could talk.
Okay, quiet, please. Thanks for coming to the audition. It's all yours. Show us your stuff.
Okay. Who wants to know about McQueen? That's me, John Alexander McQueen, lace curtain Irish from East Cleveland. I got a law practice about as big as Lucky Luciano's. You know why? Because I spent 7 years on the Cleveland police force while I went to law school at night. So I got a reputation, being a cop. Everybody comes to me with their troubles.
The Adventures of Johnny McQueen. You've never heard of it? Well, I'm not surprised. But in 1957, this TV show was the talk of the town. One of the most imaginative and popular shows ever produced in Cleveland by Clevelanders. Johnny McQueen was Cleveland's first and only television detective series, and the last dramatic television series ever produced in our hometown.
So, gentlemen, there's my clientele. Goofs, goons, hoods, neurotics, dames, and very high-class broads. I'm open for business 24 hours, and I hate it.
That was a great read. Thanks. We'll call you if we're interested. Next.
This is a true story about a chapter in Cleveland's broadcast history. How it came to be, how it was, and how it went. The Adventures of Johnny McQueen was more than just another experiment in the early days of television. It was Cleveland's show. Its genuine charm and success can be attributed to one thing. No one told them it couldn't be done. Johnny McQueen, a Cleveland original, will be back in a moment. We now return to Johnny McQueen, a Cleveland original. It's 1957. Welcome to the best location in the nation, Cleveland, Ohio, a city in motion.
Cleveland was a wonderful city, the fifth city, big market, the city of trees and parks and championship athletic teams, and a great place. And we were all very, very proud of Cleveland.
The city in those days was a lot different. Cleveland was like the fifth largest city in the United States. It was a leader. It wasn't a follower.
Cleveland was a winner. Radio was king of the airwaves. There were 3 daily newspapers to cover the beats, and just as many TV stations. Cleveland television was, after all, just 10 years old. It was still the new kid on the block. Only half the homes in the viewing area were graced with this box that was fast becoming the focal point of living room decor. Our local stations mirrored the rest of the country with shows to air from the can, the film can. Comedy, variety, drama, game shows. Whether we knew it or not, television was growing up in front of our very eyes. Not all shows were network. Local shows got their fair share of airtime.
The leaders, our leaders, Scripps Howard, and the managers all felt very strongly about local programs, to the point where they would take a lot of risks. They felt if you could involve all of the people in the community, all of their friends would watch. Therefore, you'd have strong ratings.
Unfortunately, locally produced shows had a high mortality rate, changing as frequently as Cleveland's weather. But Cleveland television was willing to take risks.
Later on, it became very evident during the days of Bill Gordon and Dorothy Fulltime doing the 1 o'clock club. At that particular time, Channel 5 was doing twice as much live programming as the other 2 stations combined. They had just enough success at their risk-taking so that they wouldn't take the money and run. They would invest it in the next risk.
Television locally was done live. There was no such thing as videotape yet. When we went on the tube, it was there for everyone to see, every mistake we made.
You never knew what was going to happen. And from that standpoint, it was very exciting. It was exciting for everyone. And I think it was really exciting for viewers because they knew it was live and they could just sit there and wait and something would go wrong, you know? Or maybe it would go wrong.
Nevertheless, television was a fascination. It didn't matter if it was a national or local show, as long as it had entertainment value. This included one of the most popular genres, the whodunits, law enforcement, detectives, private eyes. Enter Alan Douglas and Aaron Fox. Alan Douglas was the wunderkind of Cleveland broadcasting in the 50s. He came out of the gate fast to prove his stuff at Channel 5, but he wanted more than just news and talk. He wanted action.
Alan had a very unique position in Cleveland broadcasting. He was an air performer. He was the weatherman, I believe, on the 11 o'clock news on Channel 5. And so he had a lot of exposure. And at the same time, he was in the unique situation of being a salesman, selling television time on Channel 5. And so Alan, in order to interest me in doing more and more commercial television, would make sales calls with me. And we turned out to be a very effective team, and we got lots of business for my advertising agency.
Aaron Fox was the ad man, a rising star in Cleveland's advertising community. Aaron's love for the performing arts and his passion to work in seconds instead of pages drew him to the glamour of the broadcast medium, radio, and this relatively new thing called television.
From there, we segued into the idea of, why don't we do a live dramatic television show? To which I replied, a what?
This is where our mystery begins.
Alan had actually produced a live dramatic show in Cleveland prior to our involvement. And he said, together we can do it. You can help me find a sponsor for it, and you're a creative guy. We can work together on the production and so on and so forth. And I think at the time there was Martin Caine, Private Eye. And he had quite a bit of exposure on television. And Alan said, why don't we have a Private Eye? And I said, why don't we have Cleveland's own Private Eye? I said, we have plenty of need for detectives in Cleveland. And Alan came up with the name Johnny McQueen. And I said, why McQueen? And he said, well, there are a lot of Irish folks in Cleveland. And I said, okay, fine, Johnny McQueen. It will be.
And so began Johnny McQueen, Cleveland's own Private Eye. Alan Douglas and Aaron Fox were determined. They had the drive and the imagination, but who would bring Johnny to life?
Both Alan Douglas and myself knew Carl, and we knew that physically he was this prepossessing, tough guy type, and that he was a fine actor and a hard-working guy.
That Carl was Carl with a K, Carl Mackey.
I plugged into it through Alan Douglas primarily because I had acted in a series called On Stage. And so I had met Alan there, and when he came up with the idea of Johnny McQueen, and he talked with Aaron Fox, and they started to discuss who in the heck could play Johnny McQueen. I guess my name must have come up.
Carl Mackey was a logical choice. He was perfect for the part. Carl had a lengthy list of theater, radio, and television credits. But he was most noted for the part-time job he turned into a full-time career in 1954. As the managing director of Lakewood Little Theater, he was ready for the challenge. Now, to make it happen, Alan and Aaron needed an angel, a sponsor, whatever. Somebody had to pay the freight. Aaron, the ad man, had an in with the Chrysler Plymouth Dealers Association, so he called one of its officers, Phil Fleischman.
And I called him and asked if we might make a presentation to them. And I told him what we had in mind, and strangely enough, Phil thought, well, that sounds like a good idea. I thought he would laugh at us. And I broke the news to Alan and to Carl, and I said, I have a chance to make a pitch to sell the show. Then the three of us sat down and dreamed up the plot, the presentation gimmick that we were sure would sell the whole project for us.
So They asked me to do this presentation at the Hotel Carter.
And it was outlandish and insane, and we deserved to be put in jail for what we what we wanted to do.
And Aaron Fox and Alan Douglas made the pitch about what they had in mind.
And as I was going through my routine with a dismal, boring flip chart presentation talking about cost per thousand,
I was given a cue.
the door indeed was kicked open.
And I walk in and say, my name's McQueen. I'm lace curtain Irish, etc., etc.
And one of the dealers had the presumption to say, who is this guy? What's going on here? At which point Carl went over and grabbed him by the tie and said, shut up, be quiet. Put him down in the chair, and the guy shut up. And Carl went through his routine of explaining that he was a private eye, that Cleveland was his beat, that he'd been an ex-cop. This was his secretary, but he was going to fire her. He's going to have a better-looking babe each week. And he got these dealers so excited that when we were asked to leave the room, they started chattering immediately. That night, the phone rang, and it was Phil Fleischman, and his opening line was, "You're nuts, but you got it."
And so it went. Television was still in its infancy. Radio was broadcasting king, but the power was in print.
The media in 1957, the print media was extremely powerful. There were still the 3 newspapers in Cleveland. You had 2 afternoon papers and a morning newspaper.
It was with more than a little reluctance that the Fourth Estate decided to acknowledge its new rival.
Someone had the wisdom to make the decision, but no one wanted the credit for writing about television, which the business department considered its enemy. How much of an enemy was it? The Lux Video Theater was called Soap Theater because you couldn't give Lux a free commercial by calling it Lux Video Theater. The radio and television pages of the Plain Dealer, and I think it's true of the news and the press also in those days, didn't try to be a news section. It tried to be a feature section. And the creators of Johnny McQueen did us a big favor. They gave us something which we felt for sure the public would enjoy reading about and seeing pictures of the people who participated. And we hoped we were in on the beginning of something great.
They were naturally excited about it because it was such a unique concept. Here is a live, dramatic show emanating from Cleveland about Cleveland's own private eye. It gave them something to write about.
And it was not only great for them, but it was TV fodder for me. It was something new, it was something different, and every newspaper man is anxious to jump into something that is a bold venture.
George Condon and I and Alan Douglas and Aaron Fox got together, and they told us about Johnny McQueen. And we were impressed, and here was a chance for us to have something. We would have bragging rights on something in Cleveland. And so in the next day or two, maybe the following day, George Condon wrote a column about this new character that was going to be created and was going to appear once a week on Channel 5 on Sunday at 6 o'clock. Johnny McQueen, a detective drama.
Mostly, our television policemen and our private eyes have been stationed in New York and Los Angeles. A mighty coincidence in view of the fact that these cities also happen to be the nation's motion picture and television centers. Cleveland television is notable for its lack of creative programming. When somebody like Douglas comes up with an idea for a TV series to be produced here and then manages to sell the idea to a sponsor, he has achieved something truly remarkable.
All of the papers wanted success for this. They really did. I mean, Jim Frankel, Nancy Gallagher at the press, Mike Van Meter at the news, and George and I were very enthusiastic. We went out of our way in every way to help.
Both Alan and Aaron knew the talent in Cleveland and built the show with these people in mind. But the first order to fill was a tall one.
A few days later, Alan Douglas called me and said, I want to tell you a story about what Johnny McQueen is going to be like. And then I want you to also write about the fact that we're going to have auditions and we're going to try and find the guy to play this part. I said, well, all right, I'll do it. However, there is a condition. If I run the story, then when it becomes time for you to pick somebody and you want to make that announcement, I want to do that story too.
Here's a Joe Friday type assignment for you. Find Johnny McQueen. He might be your milkman, your barber, or even your husband. The accompanying sketch is
It's interesting to note that the leading men Alan and Aaron had pictured bore a striking resemblance to the McQueen-to-be. Of course, the similarity to Carl was intentional. Carl posed for the picture. He was the heads-on favorite for the role, but they wanted to verify their hunch with open tryouts. Hundreds of resumes poured in. The response was overwhelming, and for a chance to be on television, people tried anything.
And one day I was in my office wearing my advertising agency hat, and my secretary came in and said, there's a gentleman out here from an insurance company that has something he wants to present to you. And in came this very nicely dressed young man with a trench coat over his arm. And I noticed that his lower lip was trembling, and I wanted to make him feel at ease. And I said, sit down and tell me what's on your mind. And he wouldn't sit down, and he said, I've got something I've got to give you. And I said, yes. And with that, he pulled a pistol out from under his raincoat and shot me with a blank. And I stared at him for the longest time, and his lip was still quivering, and he took this gamble that he would get my attention, and he did. And I tried to control my emotion. It was not so much fear as I wanted to strangle him. But that was the kind of response that this show evoked in a lot of people. They were willing to do anything.
Finally, after auditioning the best talent Cleveland had to offer, Alan and Aaron confirmed their hunch.
And I got my wish when they picked Carl Mackey to be Johnny McQueen. I met Carl and did an interview with him.
Everybody was a Cleveland booster. And I think that carried over with the columnists, that they were happy to boost something that was Cleveland-oriented. And I think that contributed to this euphoria about a live show showing Cleveland. And the show wasn't going to go network at all, you know, it was a local show. But there was a kind of pride in that we can do it too.
The media was excited, the sponsors were excited, so excited that they wanted the show on as soon as possible. Alan and Aaron were glad to oblige. In the fast-paced world of television, one sells first, then worries about the details later. Details like a cast, a crew, rehearsals, airtime, and a finished script. They had 30 days. Johnny McQueen will return after these messages. We now return to Johnny McQueen, a Cleveland original. And so the countdown to the Johnny McQueen premiere began, and expectations were high.
It was all simultaneous. We determined that we had to do a series of things. We had to find a rehearsal hall. Alan had to talk to Channel 5 and sell them on clearing time for us in a good time period. Sunday at 6 o'clock was church time, as Johnny McQueen would say. We had to cast the first script. We had to write the first script. And we had to figure out how we were going to do it. $1,800 a week in 1957 was a moderate budget. Now, none of us had ever produced a half-hour show with on-location film and studio time and air time. So everything was done very quickly and for very few bucks.
With the role of Johnny already determined, Carl and the producers set out to cast the rest of the show.
Well, the talent was from all over Cleveland. from every theater group in Cleveland, the Playhouse, Caramoo, Lakewood, Chagrin, Euclid, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. At the time, it was said of Cleveland, it's a lousy roadshow town for shows coming to the Hannah because there are so many people busy doing theater that they don't have time to go see theater.
Alan and Aaron knew what to do to ensure the success of the show. They needed cheesecake, and lots of it.
They had a gimmick then that Johnny McQueen would have a different secretary, a bombshell each week. And so they had auditions for that too.
Alan Douglas and Aaron Fox, creators of the new Johnny McQueen video series in Cleveland, are looking for 13 attractive girls to serve as secretary to Detective Johnny.
Literally hundreds of some of the prettiest young women in northern Ohio emerged and descended on our production headquarters.
It may have been one of the selling points to the media also. And it, for want of a better word, it was cheesecake stuff, you know? So that was a kind of an appealing thing, pictorial-wise, for the newspapers.
Production for McQueen was now in full swing.
The location cinematography was intrinsic to the whole idea. We were going to show Cleveland, and that would in itself be exciting. But if we're going to shoot film on location, then we needed a very hard-working, fast-moving cinematographer. Well, I had worked with Mel Horace on commercial assignments, and we talked Mel into doing it at our rather paltry budget.
It was a chance to make something out of nothing. Because you started with absolutely nothing, and you ended up with a show.
And they made it happen.
We had no rehearsal. We showed up on the day of the shoot. The crew, the camera crew was me, and a tripod and a camera.
Carl and I and Mel Horace got our heads together and said, let's do this or that. It's like a sandlot football team drawing a play in the sand, saying, okay, let's have them do this instead of that.
And this is what we shot on. This was long before sound cameras were portable, and you could do location sound. Everything was dubbed, voiceover, and edited sound effects and what have you. But on this particular camera, it was a wind camera, and you wound the sucker up here, and if you had a full wind, you could run for 36 feet, which was 1 minute, and it sounded like that. And the first show we shot, which nothing went according to schedule.
We woke up one morning and there was snow, and we thought, well, can we shoot it? Well, why not?
So it all worked out, but it was, you know, shoot what's there, make it happen.
But what about the commercials?
Instead of the traditional announcer getting up at a break in the drama and doing a pitch, which everyone would turn off, I said, let's have McQueen very subtly work it in. I said, it will sound believable.
So I would leave my building, we'd get in the car and take off. And meanwhile, the narration was while I was driving down Euclid Avenue in that trusty Plymouth and talk about the advantages of the Plymouth and the push-button drive and all that. We were always going somewhere where the storyline would be continued then.
It wasn't an original idea, but it had never been tried in Cleveland.
Those were kind of hectic too, those driving sequences. We'd be on the Shoreway, and Ed File or Mel Horace would be in a convertible ahead of us with their, you know, head to the eyepiece, and then making motions like, come closer, that's close enough, stay there. And then they'd have to wave to the bad guys to pass them so that they could pan after them.
And we wanted every second we could get to advance the plot and the action.
McQueen never drove anything but a Chrysler product. Usually I drove a Plymouth. Sometimes I'd have a Dodge. Rarely I'd have a DeSoto, and almost never was I given a Chrysler. The Chryslers were reserved for the the bad guys.
Whatever the car was, you know, and if McQueen had a different secretary every week, he also jumped into a different vehicle every week. Nobody seemed to notice or find it as a plot flaw that this starving private eye had all these fancy cars.
The premiere was rapidly approaching, and the publicity picked up at a fevered pace.
Queens for McQueen are lined up and ready to go on the new Johnny McQueen Adventure Series starting Sunday.
The first show, here it is, suddenly time to go to the post. At 6 o'clock on Sunday, we're going to be on the air. Are we going to look like sublime idiots, or is something going to really happen?
Rehearsals were hectic. There were about 3 rehearsals outside of the studio before you got to the studio on the day of the show. And then you had like 2 hours, I think, to rehearse. But in that space of time, they were also doing the set.
And the set couldn't often be put up until the very last minute because the studio was in use for other things, too.
There was chaos in that studio. We had an hour of on-camera rehearsal.
The rehearsals, the camera rehearsals were out there, and you're acting and playing a scene, and there's an A ladder over your head because they're fixing up the lights. And you can't see the person you're acting with because the ladder's in the way.
Ladders were clanging. Nobody knew what kind of lighting plots were required. People were bumping into each other.
But I would prepare the script for all the shots, so I could turn it over to Earl Keyes at WDWS, and then he called the show while we did it live.
To do what we were doing, what they're doing at the network, and you got a whole theater, a movie theater, that you got all week to practice in it. You know, we never had that kind of experience. It was just really fly by the seat of your pants.
We'd be about 3/4 of the way through the rehearsal when someone would say, 2 minutes to airtime.
It was approaching 6 o'clock, Sunday evening, April 14th, 1957. As far as everyone was concerned, it wasn't just Cleveland. The whole world was watching.
And suddenly somebody yelled, "Okay, 30 seconds to airtime," and gulp.
You stopped, you got yourself organized.
And suddenly it got deadly quiet, and everybody stood there frozen, and somebody went like that.
Then you're on.
You're watching the first in Ohio, WEWS Television, Channel 5, a Scripps Howard broadcasting station. Now, live from Cleveland, the adventures of Johnny McQueen. Tonight's episode, Doom for a Debutante.
This is my town, Cleveland, Ohio, and I know it about as well as any man living. The architecture here is magnificent. You know, we've got the 8th tallest building in the world here. Some of the finest structures in the Middle West. Some of it right here in my office. This is Dorothea Finster, my secretary. I don't think she'll last.
Good morning, Mr. McQueen. I decided to clean things up. There wasn't anything else to do. Don't you have any typing?
Shh, people will get the idea that I'm not busy.
The premiere episode was entitled Doom for a Debutante. The daughter of a Cleveland tycoon announces that she intends to marry a short Vincent tough guy. The father hires McQueen to investigate his prospective son-in-law. But before McQueen can do so, the tough guy is found dead in Wade Park.
We didn't use cue cards or anything like that. You knew it or you didn't know it.
And you know what the other person hopefully is going to say and do. And if they say and do something else, well.
And if you didn't know it, you better open up your mouth to say something, because it was live.
I used to just hope for happy dialogue, 2 people scene, so I could get on a couple of pages ahead of that and find out where the trouble spots were going to show up.
As the scene ended and you went to a commercial, supposedly, the integrated commercial where McQueen's driving after the bad guys or something, all you did was say, "Miss Finster, we better go to so forth and so on." And you get up and start to move, and they're cut to the coming out of the Standard building, helping Miss Finster into the car, and away we went.
Everybody remembered their lines. The director directed, take 1, take 2, the cameras worked, the sound was right, They rolled the film at the appropriate moments, and it came off.
It was hectic, very hectic. It was a fast half hour. I mean, you couldn't believe it when the program was over and you thought, my God, it's over already, you know, and then, because the pressure was great. It really was.
And somehow, what evolved was a 30-minute private eye show with Cleveland's own private eye, and we weren't stoned or arrested or killed for creating an abomination. It was a decent show, and we just couldn't believe that we had done it.
And the critics agreed.
The case with Johnny McQueen is that it was fragile all the way along. We still were free to criticize, but as I recall, I tried to be very careful that the criticism was helpful and that it would keep the show going and it would improve it. It was almost in the characterization of a crusade with all of us.
Maurice Van Meter of the Cleveland News made a very favorable comparison.
There was plenty of fast gunning on television Sunday night. The three plays I watched were The Adventures of Johnny McQueen, The Cab Driver, and Alfred Hitchcock Presents. If you put all three of these crime stories side by side, I feel you'd be inclined to give Johnny McQueen a vote of goodwill, if not of confidence.
The feeling was that there was potential here. And so I guess we were all spurred to make the second one even better. And so there was a great feeling of anticipation anyway about the success of the series.
Johnny McQueen, the Cleveland original, will be right back. We now return to Johnny McQueen, a Cleveland original. Hundreds of letters and postcards poured in. People wanted to see more, and so did the critics. But as production on the second episode began, they were dealt an unexpected setback.
Alan Douglas, the man who helped create Johnny McQueen, has withdrawn from the Cleveland-produced video series due to the press of his other WEWS duties.
Alan left the show for perhaps his own reasons, and he said, you guys have a real good handle on this show and where you want to go with it. He said, let's not have two captains.
We were getting ready to do the next show, and Aaron said, Alan's no longer with the program. So what I want to know is if you would direct him now. And so I ended up not only playing Johnny McQueen, I ended up directing him then.
Aaron Fox, co-founder of McQueen, will take over the show. A freelance author, William Milhon, will help him in the writing.
And our studio, our office, was his kitchen table. And I would come after work. We would sit at his kitchen table all night long. By daylight, we would have a script.
And so, on with the show, or at least the second episode.
So that we had a audition one day, a read-through the next. The next, we were probably out shooting the movie stuff that was going to have to be integrated in that script. And then that day later, or that night, or the next morning, be rehearsing the script. And I often wasn't learning lines until, Saturday. And the show went on Sunday.
Now, live from Cleveland, The Adventures of Johnny McQueen, starring Carl Mackey, Patty Rowe, Joe Berg, Arnold Palmer, and a special appearance by Bill Smoochie Gordon.
Bill Gordon, at that point in his career, was perhaps the preeminent air performer in Cleveland. When he was on the, I believe it was WHK, and he would say, all right, it's time for a horn honk. And he would say, all right, now 50,000 automobile horns would honk on cue because Bill had asked him to do it. He's the Pied Piper of radio. So to get him in his busy schedule was a coup.
And I get this phone call. I said, would you like to come downtown and get in a convertible with Patty Rowe?
And again, the mystique of the Johnny McQueen show.
I said, well, sure, let's do it. And who will I meet? Patty Rowe. We used to date one another at the College of Worcester when I was in the Navy back a long time ago.
We'd tell them where to show up, when, put them behind the wheel of a DeSoto and say, okay, drive down here and pick up Patty Rowe.
So we get in this car, this Chrysler-type automobile with a top down, off we went.
And we whip off in a convertible. It looks really glamorous.
I did it because it was a challenge, fun to do, and even though I was very busy, there was no money involved. And when there's no money involved, you figure, it's got to be fun, or let's don't do it. So they said, we're not going to pay anything, just come down and get in a car and drive away. I said, I can handle that.
There wasn't any rehearsal time. You do it. This is what we're looking for. Go in and do it. So we all had fun. It was a very relaxed type of environment. There was no pressure except do it. And but so we did it, and it came out, we thought, very well.
There's nothing that beats a live performance. It's just, I mean, the adrenaline runs like it's never going to run again.
And so the second episode aired. Now even the public responded in its letters to the editor.
I heartily concur with your opinion of the Johnny McQueen adventures. It leaves one with such a warm glow after viewing our own wonderful Cleveland scenes on TV.
I'd like to know how come he didn't put any money in the parking meter when he parked in front of the police station. I know if my dad did that, he certainly
I enjoy Johnny McQueen TV stories on WEWS very much. The local color adds to the story's interest. The commercials are interesting, too. I like the way they come twist and tween. Hope Johnny is here to stay.
First, about you, you write like some amateur schoolboy. The things you pick stink most of the time. If I were you, I'd throw in the towel and quit, especially when you try to praise a TV show before you see it. That Johnny McQueen show, whew! For the first few minutes we had it on, I almost had to call the fumigators. A.T. Lipinski.
Well, not everyone was a McQueen fan, but more and more people tuned in.
So we had a lot of publicity. Lee, my wife, was just saying the other day, you know, she couldn't believe it that 2 weeks after we were on the air, we'd be out someplace and she'd hear somebody say,
Look, there's Johnny McQueen. We couldn't believe it. I mean, the show had only been on for 2 weeks, and people recognized him already.
That reaction from the man in the street is what made it.
Johnny McQueen was getting more press, more viewers, and a new cameraman.
When the pressure, business pressure of Mel Horace's new studio, you know, demanded that he leave, I immediately thought of Ed File. I had worked with him on many commercial projects, and I called Ed and I tried to sugarcoat the assignment. I said, Ed, it's a piece of cake, you'll have fun.
Everybody who's making films has this fantasy of doing dramatic stuff.
And when he saw what he was into, this running from location to location, all hours of the day and night, under all weather conditions, he kind of looked at both Carl and myself and said, this ain't exactly what you described to me, Aaron. But to his credit, he stayed with it.
If you enjoy filmmaking, then you enjoy doing these things.
When I was writing the script, I had locations in mind. I knew this place in the flats. I knew this place out in here and there. So I just drew on my memory for where we might shoot.
Pretty much we were told, show up at a gym at East 9th and Carnegie, upstairs of an old firehouse, and that was the place where the gym was.
When I had a part for a black prize fighter, Franklin Johnson of Karamu was perfect. Franklin is an athletic-looking guy and a handsome guy, but he said, Aaron, I'm not a fighter. Who do I have to fight? Well, in this scene, he had to box Rocky Castellani, who was either the middleweight champion or the #1 contender. And Johnson never forgave me for pushing him into that situation.
Carl and I edited the film. He looked at it at a film viewer and with a footage counter to determine how long scenes were lasting. Because we had to have this timed fairly accurately to fit. We went through and estimated and then put it together. And that went to given to the projectionist at the TV station.
Episode 3 got better, so much so that it caught the eye of a national publication variety.
The Johnny McQueen stanza has moved along well, and the third in the series was the best yet in plot, presentation, and filming.
As the McQueen momentum was accelerating, the brakes were being put on by the sponsor.
Oddly enough, the cause of the McQueen crisis is not primarily the fault of the series. Producing a TV show in Cleveland is an uphill, discouraging struggle. Now the patient is critical. The Dodge doctors can save him. It would be to their glory if they did.
But the cast and crew of McQueen knew they had a winner.
I think the ratings, as I recall, were quite good. I think Channel 5 was very pleased with the ratings. They were very pleased with the publicity. Tons of mail. We got mail from everywhere.
Hope you will continue to show these marvelous shots of Cleveland. The music was also quite effective. The show made one feel that Cleveland is as exciting as New York. Also like the way McQueen thinks out loud when going to various places. RJ.
Dear Johnny McQueen, I've been watching your programs. I like the mystery and when the secretary called you honey.
Bravo! McQueen series looks fine.
Dear Mr. Johnny McQueen, I like your live program. How do you think it up? I like the mystery, Sandy.
Now, live from Cleveland, The Adventures of Johnny McQueen, starring Carl Mackey and Patty Rowe, with special guest star Robbie Palmer, Miss Ohio, as Shelley the Singer. Tonight's episode, The Nightclub Singer.
We cast Robbie because we knew her and because she wanted to be cast, and she wouldn't leave either Alan Douglas or myself alone until she got a part, and she did very well. It was, you know, a matter of pride, a labor of love, to use a cliche. Businessmen, businesswomen interrupted their very busy schedules to work on this project. It was fulfilling and it was fun.
McQueen carries on. Greater Cleveland Chrysler dealers met during the weekend to reconsider their decision to drop Johnny McQueen after last night's show. The good news is that Johnny will continue 4 more weeks.
Realizing that producing a weekly show was tough enough, Aaron and Carl decided to keep it simple by installing a permanent secretary.
The gag, so to speak, had played out, and what we really needed was a competent actress because the part of the secretary was expanded.
Not every girl was up to the acting. None of them were bad. They all looked good. But finally, I think the determination was made we're better off with one girl each week. Patty was it.
I got the part of a goofy secretary type.
I believe her name was Miss Finster, which is German for darkness, and that she was supposed to be a blank in the dark at all times, and Miss Finster was really in the finster at all times.
And Miss Finster was ditzy, you know, but she meant well. She tried hard, and she was always cheerful. And I don't think she was all that bright. But it takes a smart person to play it on anybody that dumb. You know?
Now, live from Cleveland, The Adventures of Johnny McQueen, starring Carl Mackey and Patty Rowe. Tonight's episode, The Millionaire's Safe.
Episode 7 was a Western theme show, and perhaps the boldest Johnny McQueen produced. Westerns were a big draw, and Aaron knew just the guy to do it.
Tom Shem was a very, very unusual and intelligent guy, and he was very good with a Colt 44. He could take it out and spin it and so forth. He was a Western buff, but it was inevitable that he would come to me and say he had an idea for a Western script, which he did.
Tom Shem played a Matt Dillon type character. He was a cowboy star on a television show, and he was coming into Cleveland. And he had been received some threats, so McQueen was hired to protect him.
In fact, that is the script in which Nancy Gallagher appeared.
I'm sure I got cast in Johnny McQueen because they wanted a publicity story, and it was fun, and then it gave me something to write about. It was interesting. I found it very interesting.
So we did a takeoff on the Gunsmoke scene with a camera between the marshal's legs showing the bad guy, who was Tom Slowey. in the distance, and they were going to have a shootout. So we shoot the thing, and Slowy, who gets hit, instead of falling backward, which the .45 slug would have done to him, he falls forward, you know. Well, at any rate, we didn't reshoot it. That was it.
All the on-location shoots were frenetic. That's how it was. We ran from, literally ran from location to location. Grab this shot, grab that shot. If an airplane was taking off, we said, hold it for a second till we get the shot, and people accommodated us. They realized that we were struggling.
Then we had a scene where Shem and his entourage are arriving at the airport. So we have them coming down the stairway from an airplane, and we have them get into convertibles, and we go downtown, and the people are just supposedly, yay, there's cowboy heroes in town. Well, the long shots that we had of the convertible with Slowy and Shem waving to the crowd shows no crowd. Just, you know, people going, what the hell's going on here? So we finally solved the problem by shooting close up.
By the end of May, the crew of Johnny McQueen finally gets a break in their grueling weekly production schedule, thanks to preempting by a televised Cleveland Indians game. That breather gave Aaron Fox a chance to read some new scripts from a best-selling author, no less.
Dan Tyler Moore, I think, had been in what was then the OSS. He had written a book called The Terrible Game. It was about spy missions. He called me and said, hey, he has an idea for a script. He just sort of came out of the woodwork when he heard about the show and was right there and made a very valuable contribution. His scripts were quite good, quite professional.
Thanks to Dan Tyler Moore's reputation and talent, Johnny McQueen had a fresh spark.
Now, live from Cleveland, The Adventures of Johnny McQueen, starring Carl Mackey and Patty Rowe. Johnny probes the adventures of a young stamp collector in another story by best-selling Cleveland author Dan Tyler Moore. Tonight's episode, The British Guiana Magenta.
As Aaron and the sponsors had originally agreed, Johnny McQueen took a summer vacation after episode 9, with the intention of returning in the fall with 16 new shows. And it looked like the show would return. It never happened. Episode 9 was the final show.
The real sad thing really was when we were on the air for 9 weeks, and we thought, okay, we're off for the summer now, we'll come back in the fall, and we got all summer to really work up something, and the Chrysler Plymouth dealers had decided against it.
In spite of the tremendous publicity that they were getting, I think they chose a calmer, saner route. Let's buy something that's already packaged on film and produced in Hollywood. We know what we've got, and let's relax.
And they bought Highway Patrol with Broderick Crawford for $2,000 a week, I guess. And that was so simple. You know, it's a program was in a can, and they put it on.
This was live TV. There was no videotape. No kinescopes were shot. After episode 9, Johnny McQueen became a memory.
Dear Johnny McQueen, I like your occupation. I like it when you captured the bandit. You are smart. You are a great man. I wish you had another mystery. The end.
Johnny McQueen was, in fact, a Cleveland original. There was never another show like it to hit the airwaves in Cleveland. And even though it aired for only 9 episodes, it made an impact on the viewers and on the people involved. Some went to Hollywood, some went to Broadway, and some became legends right here in our own backyard. It may have happened over 30 years ago, but to some, it seems like only yesterday.
It's strange, even 36 years later, there are people who still say, Johnny McQueen, oh yeah, I remember that.
That was probably its major selling point, was that here you saw your city in a dramatic series. And that was fun, and it was exciting, and it was new.
Oh, for heaven's sakes. Johnny McQueen, I think, was one of the best live shows ever produced out of Cleveland.
Your set is Cleveland, Ohio, our hometown. And it looks good. Cleveland looks good on television. Doesn't even need any makeup. Looks great.
It was special for a lot of us who were involved in it, and it was special for Clevelanders who saw friends they knew in a show. They hadn't seen that before.
It certainly brings it back home. It is not Never Never Land. It's 9th and Euclid.
I thought it was a good show. And I found it hard to believe that anybody would try to do a big project like that and do it every week and come up with a script and all that production and all those cars.
And what about those cars? Those fabulous 57s are still around, restored and preserved by members of the Walter P. Chrysler Club.
It seems kind of strange that after all these years that we had something good that we didn't know we had when we had it.
And it's easy to put Johnny McQueen right up there with the half a dozen most interesting and innovative things that happened in television at that time.
And even though Alan Douglas was out of the picture after the premiere episode, his vision to produce an original live show did come true a few years later. His legacy to Cleveland is one of the longest-running local programs in broadcast history, The Morning Exchange.
Johnny McQueen, I think, was a phenomenon, a once-in-a-lifetime special happening that captured the imagination and the pride of everybody that lived in the city.
We didn't know that we couldn't do this. We couldn't do that show. We just didn't know we couldn't do it, so we did it.
As I ever.